Situated in Laurel, Maryland, lies the rotting carcass of an infamous institution. A hospital once driven by a mission to restore mental health and create productive lives for the psychologically ill. That honorable yet fleeting mission would soon fade as the asylum deteriorated into an institutional nightmare. Forest Haven Asylum is now a ruin, wasting away just outside of Washington, D.C. It's a collection of decrepit buildings haunted by horror stories of physical and psychological abuse so grisly it came to be known as one of the most deadly psychiatric institutions in American history. Forest Haven opened in 1925, aimed at being a pastoral resort for the mentally challenged. It was regarded as a state-of-the-art facility geared towards rehabilitating and educating people with severe psychological afflictions. The ultimate goal was to teach patients useful skills to help pave the way for them to live a somewhat normal, productive life. Sitting on nearly 300 acres of quiet, rural landscape, its 22 structures housed up to 1,000 patients. In its early years, the hospital earned a fitting, progressive reputation. But over the next half-century, this idyllic wellness refuge crumbled into a whorehouse of abuse and death. Some claim that tortured victims still haunt the abandoned grounds of this American nightmare. Haunting possessions of former patients, such as family photos or a child's teddy bear, are still on site and are said to attract the furious spirits of the Institute's victims. An atmosphere of malevolence infests the buildings that now stand empty, with peeling paint, rotting wood, grime, and graffiti. When it first opened, the hospital specialized in the treatment of children who were mentally handicapped or otherwise unable to function in normal society. Adults were also admitted in order to help families ease the burden of supporting mentally handicapped relatives. Operating like a farm colony, residents were offered training and emotionally empowering lessons in tasks that would make them productive members of a community. In 1940, Eleanor Roosevelt was on hand for the dedication of the hospital's new administration center. The 38,000 square foot building hosted 38 hospital beds, 2 fracture beds, 18 cribs for infants, plus an operating table, laboratories, an X-ray facility, and a psychiatric ward. What looks like ancient bomb shelters today were once cottages with pleasant names like Magnolia, Pine, Oak, and Hawthorn. Unlike similar institutions of the time, patients would not be relegated to staring helplessly into space day after day, but instead served as active members of a working village. They milked cows, tended crops, had exercise routines, and enjoyed the rich nature that surrounded them. Here was to be a place where the handicapped would not suffer the stigma of their condition. They would not be abandoned as broken people with no hope. Here, they could peacefully function among friends and caregivers. But by the 1950s, Forest Haven began to devolve from its admirable beginning. Its cutting-edge amenities became outdated, and financial problems prevented adequate upkeep or innovation. It didn't incorporate newer medical practices, and its extracurricular activities and humane comforts were soon discarded. By the 1960s, the complex deteriorated into a dismal warehouse for discarded human beings. People who were helpless, emotionally disturbed, and in many cases, the misdiagnosed prisoners of a perverted system. Resources decreased even as its population increased. Victims of epilepsy and other incurable mental conditions were added to the population and simply thrown into a neglected repository of the unwanted. Unwilling inmates eventually included the blind, the deaf, and victims of other unclassified ailments that had nothing to do with mental illness. The institution was woefully understaffed, and grossly unqualified managers were put in charge. With matters rapidly falling apart, The focus became less on rehabilitation and more on simply maintaining order. Residents would wander the grounds aimlessly. They were treated by doctors deemed incompetent by the state of Maryland. Patient abuse became rampant. In the 1970s, the cruelty spiraled out of control. Though many of the patients didn't belong there, frustrated staffers would lash out at them, resulting in severe beatings. Unexplained deaths reached numbers in the hundreds, and bodies were shuttled off to a morgue in the basement of the facility. They would later be buried on nearby grounds, their graves unnamed and forgotten. Some of the burials were so shallow, the bodies re-emerged as the soil eroded. Nearly 400 victims were buried anonymously in the desolate field adjacent to the hospital. In the mid-1970s, young patients from a nearby orphanage were sent to Forest Haven, and when stories of abuse surfaced, the hospital was sued by the state. Oddly, the institution continued to operate, and even allowed a doctor with a suspended medical license to practice there. Helpless patients sustained injuries that included scratches on the body, chipped teeth, cuts, bruises, and in one case, a raw, painful back condition caused by being restrained in a urine-soaked bed. That victim died in 1976 at the age of 18. Stories of sexual abuse surfaced, along with harrowing accounts of patients who were simply abandoned. Ghastly tales of patients beaten with belts, switches, and even baseball bats came to light as well. In addition, hapless victims were subjected to horrific medical experiments by unqualified doctors. Corruption among the staff was rampant. In 1982, a staff member was convicted of stealing $40,000 of patients' funds held in the institution's bank account. Despite receiving a 5-year sentence, the stolen money was never recovered. In the late 1980s, there was a spike in deaths caused by aspiration pneumonia, a condition caused by improper feeding procedures, such as force-feeding patients while they were lying down. This would cause food to enter the lungs and choke the victim to death. Yet despite years of lawsuits, Forest Haven remained open and continued its reign of torture. Finally, in August of 1989, police raided the institute. They found a 22-year-old man lying on his side in a hospital gown with dried blood in his mouth, having died from aspiration pneumonia. 10 other bodies were discovered that day. Today, the decaying bones of Forest Haven Asylum are patrolled by a team of security guards. Visitors tell of encounters with eerie glowing orbs and apparitions in the field where the unnamed dead are buried. They report disembodied screams or moans echoing through the empty structures, and some say they felt the sensation of being touched by cold, invisible hands. Forest Haven stands as a fetid monument to one of the worst and most sadistic institutions in American history. A huge granite marker bears the names of numerous victims, who many claim still stalk the bleak landscape of this terrifying sanatorium. My name is Scott, and thank you so much for watching. We are Mystery Syndicate. If you like what we do, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel, leave a comment, and give this video a like. And to be notified when we post new videos, hit that notification bell. Also, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Patreon. And for exclusive merchandise, visit our website at www.mysterysyndicate.com. From all of us at Mystery Syndicate, thank you again. We sincerely appreciate your support.